Hello, everyone. Hi, Valentina. Hello to those who are tuning in today. Welcome to our Research Insights with Elite Mind Academy. So, those are our weekly conversations between me, founder and CEO of Elite Mind Academy, and Valentina, head of Insights and Impact. And the purpose of those live conversations is for us to share insights from our research, but also to discuss the topics from organizational well-being industry that often stay behind the closed doors. And today we have a very needed topic that we can see from our research, and that is people skills for managers. So, Valentina, what are you noticing? What are some of your insights from your research that you're conducting so far on missing skills for managers?
Yeah, certainly. So, from our research so far, this issue of managers not having people skills as an umbrella topic is coming up a lot. And it's a big influencer over well-being because often people are feeling as though they can't talk to their managers about difficulties that they're having emotionally, whether related to work or outside of work. Talk about personal circumstances generally that might be affecting work. And also things like managers not having the people skills to communicate effectively, not just about what is going on in the organization, what tasks are, how those tasks fit into a bigger picture, etc., but also about their aims and objectives within the team dynamic in terms of what do we want to set as our dynamic here, who can you go to for support, and kind of what do difficult concepts mean. And with that communication as well as things like communicating about what support infrastructure is available, things like that. I could go on and on with a list, but I'll just stop and maybe start with the first topic, which is that a lot of people are finding that they don't feel that they can talk to their managers when they're experiencing emotional difficulties.
Yeah.
It's a really big barrier and a really big cause of absenteeism as well.
Yeah, and thank you to those who are tuning in. Please share with us any questions that you have and any experiences from your work. So I see Abigail has tuned in, and she's also working with organizations and delivering health support. Would be interesting to hear as well your experiences, Abigail. In terms of what are some of those specific skills that are missing. And I just wanted to go back and build, Valentina, on something that you said about the fact that most people don't feel comfortable talking to their managers, right? And there is this statistic, I think it's by Benenden Health, that 39% of people actually hide some sort of health issue from their employers. There is some other research that includes a little bit wider assessment, and it goes beyond health. It actually includes how you are feeling about the workplace. And there are calculations that nearly half of the people are actually struggling with something at work, and they are not able to share this with their employers, and specifically with like work related stress. Maybe there's too much pressure, maybe there is too much responsibility from their employers, maybe they're not happy with their ways of working. And if you think about this, if half of our employees are not speaking up and they're not reaching out, the question that we are trying to answer here is why, right? What stops them from having those conversations? And I think very often we are expecting people to speak up, right? And to reach out. And, we give them all of these helplines and say the help is available. We just need to reach out. But I think when we're looking at those statistics, we are realizing that this is not enough. This is not good enough, right? It's not enough to tell people to reach out, and it's not enough to send people to, these generic helpline numbers that are available, anyone can Google, right? They're public helplines, right? So it's really time for managers, for employers to realize that we need to, instead of telling people to reach out, we actually need to know how to reach in. We need to know how to notice the signs. We need to know how to create that safety so that people do speak. And we need to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations, right? Because very often it's like many companies are even afraid to ask their employees how they're feeling, because they don't know how to handle those conversations, and they don't know what else is there that they can do, and they don't necessarily have capacity and resources to then support people. So it's kind of taking this approach of ignorance is a bliss, and I'd rather not know certain things, that so I don't have to deal with them. So what do you think, Valentina? Where is this balance between, what is the responsibility of employees to actually share? And, if we're not happy with something in a workplace, of course, if we don't raise those concerns, then they will never be addressed, right? But also, what is then responsibility for the employers and for managers to reach in and to actually notice some of those concerns, and to be able to direct sometimes people to support that, maybe they don't even know that they need it themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, to recognize that dual responsibility, because there is a responsibility on the individual to speak up, and potentially in situations where they might feel a bit uncomfortable doing so. But also there's a huge responsibility on employers and managers in particular to make them feel safe and able to do that. Because even if say in a supervision or catch up with a manager, they ask you, how are you feeling? Are you having any problems? The psychological environment that has been created will dictate how able someone actually is to speak up about those things, even if they're asked directly. And this is where we really need to think about kind of human needs and a sense of safety. If somebody fears for their job, so if there has been evidence or examples in the past where somebody has maybe been let go or not given a promotion or things like that because they have said something that goes against the grain, or if there's a general environment in which when somebody offers a critique or constructive criticism that's not taken on board, it's far, far less likely that someone is then going to feel safe speaking up about something that they've noticed or something that they're struggling with. If we're thinking about personal issues or things that might be going on emotionally for someone, or health issues as well, similarly, that needs to be explicitly said that that is okay, and that speaking up about these things, having adjustments, having time off is not going to affect your role. Your role is secure and safe. We will do everything that we can to support you and help you work, but also give you the space and the time off if needed. Those things need to be said explicitly, and they need to be followed through. So it can't be all talk. There has to be an example, because if people see that actually this isn't happening, they don't have an example of somebody speaking up about their mental health, their physical health, or something that they're struggling with in the organization, and that being taken on constructively and positively, then they're not going to believe that that's going to happen for them. So there's the responsibility of the organization to create that psychologically safe environment and to create that security so that someone can speak up. Then on the individual's front, I would always urge you and urge anyone, of course, you need to assess your personal circumstances. How risky is it to say these things and potentially suffer the repercussions if it goes negatively? But I would always really urge people to speak up where possible. And there's also ways that you can do that in a constructive way. So you can talk about your experience, how you feel, and not make accusations, but just talk about what you have experienced and the effect that it's had on you, things that you've observed. Paying attention to tone and making sure that you're in a calm state of mind before going into conversations like that, so that you're not coming into it with an aggressive or accusatory tone. These are all things that we can do as the individual or the employee to also contribute to that being hopefully a more successful conversation, and also try to offer options for solutions. If you're raising a problem, it shows that you're thinking about the organization.
Yeah, this very, very interesting point here that you're highlighting is again that people are sometimes scared to raise those concerns, because we are not being taught how to manage upwards, right? There are certain ways how we can bring concerns to the table, like you say, in a very constructive way. And I remember when I started working first in a restaurant, and I had this kind of a lot of, I'm quite strategic thinker, and I can see the big picture, and I can see, the dots, and I can see when something is not aligned and it's not connecting. And I would go to my manager's office and I would complain, right? It's like, oh, this is not happening and this is not being done and this, and, and I felt like, I'm doing a good job by kind of raising some of those issues and concerns, right? And there's one time, and I was like, whatever, 19-year-old girl, right? My first job. So the excitement and level of energy there is very different, and the way of communication is also very different. But there was that moment where my manager then said to me, he said, stop bringing me problems, bring me solutions. And he was, obviously that was a longer conversation, and I was really told off for basically complaining. And he says, I don't ever want to hear a problem from you unless you have a solution for it. And of course that was very hard to hear, and I cried and so on. But actually, that really taught me a good lesson, because after that, it's, if we really take that perspective, like, if I really want to drive change, moaning and complaining about this not going to make it happen, right? We need to be very constructive in terms of what specific change I want to see. What is my role in that? How is it affecting me? What can I do about this? What support and help I need from somebody else? So from individual point of view, it's definitely having this kind of solution focused mindset, rather than, putting ourselves in this victim state and saying, I'm being abused or discriminated, or I have too much stress and pressure and so on. But really being in a very constructive way and looking for those perspective. Yeah, some wonderful questions here from and comments from Rennie, Rob, Jackie. So I'm saying that, of course, it's a great loss for the businesses when they lose skilled staff. And Rennie's commenting that traditionally most managers are men, and traditionally there is more difficulty for them to open up. Managers don't know how to deal with someone who approaches them. The so-called soft skills of communication, listening, not rushing into a fix-it mentality, psychological safety is all very important. Absolutely. Yeah, go on, Valentina.
That's also prompted me to think about something else as well. So on that point specifically, completely agree. I mean, it's having training simply in recognizing when you're trying to fix something, and actually just being able to create space for someone to be heard can do wonders. And with that in mind, it's also made me think about how, different people will struggle with different types of conversations, and will also come at them from different perspectives. So yes, this is the kind of gendered example here of that men are more likely, because of social conditioning, to struggle to open up and have those kinds of vulnerable conversations, but also know how to hold that kind of emotion in a safe and empathetic way. But also people from different cultures and backgrounds will be coming with different experiences and what's normal within their culture or their background or their upbringing. And that will affect how they engage in difficult conversations. And training around awareness of that and awareness of those differences can also do wonders in making sure that everyone gets heard equally, no matter what background they're from or what their experiences are. Similarly, if for people with neurodiversity who might struggle to understand displays of emotion and non-verbal communication, learning how to express and build that kind of rapport with verbal communication or with more explicit terminology can be really useful. So I think that's really important to be aware of as well. So these soft skills around listening non-judgmentally, as you rightly point out, Rennie, are also to be kind of within a package of understanding where they, there's other factors at play here in terms of how those will be interpreted and what's needed. And I think that's also a really important point that you've made about, we rarely see these skills mentioned in job descriptions, as though they're a nice to have, but they're not necessary for the role of manager. And I would completely disagree. I think they are absolutely necessary for the role of manager. There's a study in the US that showed that 50% of employees have at some point left their job to get away from their manager. That's 50% of employees. That's a huge loss.
Yeah. And Rob is commenting about that as well, saying that very often we manage upwards by survival of the fittest. And so we end up with 100% solutions focused engagement. But I think that definitely, this kind of listening without judgment, and kind of this root cause analysis, understanding where these problems are coming from, are very important. But we can see that the way the progression and the management development usually takes place, that it's not the most skillful person and the most effective and efficient person that gets promoted, but the one who plays the game, right, of organizational politics, who can fit within the rules and structure of organization and knows how to play according to those rules, right? So by nature of the hierarchy of the organization, and then the competitiveness of this promotion vertical ladder development scheme, right, we are already excluding certain people who are not fitting that criteria of what does it mean to be in this specific position and this specific role. So definitely it's if we're creating that safe space where we are listening to people who are different, we are then adding much more value to our organizations. And instead of creating this job description saying that's exactly how it needs to look like, we should be much more open and looking at what value each and every individual can bring to the company, to this role, to this specific ways of working, so we can really get the best out of every person. And within that, when we were talking about kind of listening, it's crucial, right? Because this is not about just telling people what to do, but really getting the best out of them, right? And I think there's two aspects in that, right? There is, we talked about this kind of, like we need to reach in rather than, tell people to reach out. But it comes in two different ways, right? Because on one hand, we need to reach in when they need help and support. We need to reach in when maybe they are not saying how they're feeling. Maybe they're not recognizing that they need support. Things like stress and burnout, you can be in your kind of very strong positive mindset and you think like, I'm fine. And it's actually easier to notice burnout from outside than to notice it in yourself. So this is crucial. And there is this kind of element of support there, and ability to kind of empathize and know the signs and know what to watch out for. But there is other aspect of reaching in, which is actually recognizing people's abilities, skills, and potential, which they don't even know that they have, right? So, and we see all these examples where, I am in where I am in my life and in my business because somebody has noticed potential in me. Somebody gave me opportunity. Somebody gave me chances, right? And they did that and they put me for those roles and opportunities and activities that I didn't even know that I can do, right? So I think there is a fair balance as well, between really recognizing what support this person needing, but also, recognizing and building their unique strengths. And that's where you talked about, this diversity and neurodiversity and, variety of skill set and abilities that people bring on board. Our traditional management and the way we progress in the businesses are not recognizing that potential. And it's so crucial to make sure that we balance this diversity and inclusion with this development of skill set and how we grow talent internally.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important point that you've highlighted there about building in a recognition of diversity into our management styles. I think that and often in larger organizations as well, and actually in our research shows that these issues come up more frequently in larger organizations, we can become less and less flexible and more process and structure driven. Yes, that's useful for streamlining things and having effective working processes, but what it's not useful for is responding to opportunity and recognizing opportunity, and recognizing need as well and difference, and so training around actually how to kind of unlearn unconscious bias, which is, it's always a lifelong process, and everyone should start now if you haven't already. But it's, starting off with some kind of training at work can just begin that process. And having that built into management training means that people are more likely to recognize skills and abilities when they see them that might not fit into the usual structure of how you or how an organization assesses ability, or, with regards to meeting targets or KPIs, or, the completing tasks that have already been set. And also having an awareness of those different types of skills and what they're most useful for, even if they don't pertain to the kind of department that you are managing or the project that you are managing, but being able to recognize those skills when you see them in people and build that into their own personal development and their own progression is how they'll feel rewarded.
I wanted to share something from the research that I've been reading about this unconscious bias and how we actually perceive diversity differently, which I think is very valid here. And you are pointing out this important kind of need for this lifelong development and inclusion, and let's say having more diversity in nurseries and so on can really break down some of those boundaries. But it doesn't take a lifetime to actually change our subconscious biases. It can be an instant, and I want to give an example, and maybe we can explore how this can be applied in organizations, right? So when we talk about empathy and we talk about listening skills, that when we are tuning in to other human being, when we are kind of experiencing, their pain and what they are going through, our brain areas lit up in exactly the same places where how that person is experiencing it, right? So it kind of this kind of mirror neurons of kind of like mirroring and matching is very powerful way of building that empathy and really making sure that we are relating to other person's pain and experience. Now, when you put people in the brain scan and you check to what extent they are relating to that other person's pain. Now, if the person's skin color is different than yours, the brain doesn't actually fire up to the same level, which means that we are actually wired not to relate and not to feel to the same extent people who are somehow different than us, right? However, imagine there was this experiment done where, there's like a video of a hand and somebody stabs knife in it, right? And obviously, this is a shocking thing to see, and everyone responds to it like, oh, in pain, right? And again, if that hand is a different color to yours, you will, and again, this is not only, like white people discriminating people of color. Actually, this works, in both directions, right? If the skin color is different than yours, we actually struggle to relate to the same pain. However, you have this kind of categorization. And now imagine this example that now you have a group of people, of different skin colors. And now you have a preference and you ask people, let's say what football team they prefer, right? And let's say if I'm a fan of Aston Villa and you are a fan of Manchester United, and you put the relevant caps on people for that, now you suddenly recategorized all of this. And just by having this instant recategorization that this person also likes, the same football and so on, now the brain again fires up exactly the same way with the people who are wearing that cap rather than skin color. And skin color doesn't matter in an instant. So this is a great example of really looking at how can we redraw the boundaries and not categorize people on, their background, religion, skin color, but really create ways of inclusion in a way that builds this sense of unity and connection, and builds that empathy, which is so crucial for this working environment.
That's such a fantastic example. And I think that that's a really tangible way of showing how important it is to teach people the ability as well to find commonalities with people who are different. and emphasize that there are always commonalities. Rennie, you've mentioned in the chat that, we are likely to feel more in threat when we are around people that we perceive as different. And that's absolutely true. We do.
And as we can see, it's evolutionary, right? Like different skin color, we don't feel the pain and we feel somehow threatened. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think what's important to recognize here is that we can shift our perspective on that difference. So we can shift our perspective on seeing, what difference are we looking at here, or what commonality are we looking at here? And so practices, taking it to really practical advice, is having situations where and constructing environments where people are more able to share those commonalities means that you are much more likely to break down those kind of like that unconscious bias, but essentially those socially imposed or kind of culturally encouraged ways of categorizing people, and actually recategorize based on the things that you have in common. So shared foods, you can do this through games, and do it through,
Preference of music, of food, of, shared games and activities. Yeah.
Certainly. And I think that often these things can become more embedded in culture when they, or kind of can influence culture more when they're the smaller things that happen on a regular basis, rather than, a team building day. When you do activities and games, fantastic. I'm not saying don't do that, do. However, that has to be carried into the everyday practices of the organization. Where are the opportunities for somebody to share something personal about themselves and what it means to them? And, and we can connect. There are some fundamental human experiences that everyone can connect over. And a lot of those are the personal things that we don't always feel we can share. Things like relationships, children, parents, wants and desires for security, for connection, affiliation. And that's why it's so important to be able to have those kinds of personal communications at work as well.
Yeah. Great. So we kind of looked at all of this kind of more positive side of things, right? Like how can we create that trust and inclusion, and we build that empathy and connection and belonging. But let's look at the dark side of the communication, right? Are we, there's importance in building this kind of safety and trust to encourage individuals to then speak up. But now, what happens with those conversations that we don't feel that belong in a workplace, right? And here is a question, and this is a question for those who are listening. What is it that we should be sharing with our managers and what we shouldn't? And there are specific things that there's a huge risk actually from business perspective, where we are telling people that the only person to whom they need to need to get past to get any support is the line manager, right? Because it's not always actually appropriate to maybe share some of your personal concerns with the person who is your direct line manager, because stats speak for themselves, and actually there's a huge percentage of people who are missing out on opportunities, on development, on career progression. Sometimes they even lose their jobs once they disclose some of those things to line managers. And this is not always kind of done on purpose. It's not as if it's we are discriminating someone because they have mental health issues, but just by the nature of it is that, if you are, let's say, my employee, and you tell me that you are struggling with something, I will try to protect you by giving you less work. I will not be pushing you for the next career opportunity because I'm like, oh, you're already struggling, so I'm not going to give you more, right? So sometimes our intentions are right, but the results are actually really the opposite of what we're trying to do. And maybe, this extra opportunity or excitement or the new job title is exactly what needs to get that person out of this, stagnant struggle, a state of struggle, and really, move them beyond their depression and other life experiences, right? So some of those fears are definitely not unfounded. So, what are some of the things that maybe we shouldn't share? And and how can we still make sure that we are supporting people in a right way?
I think that's a really, really good question, because there's, I think that will be different for each circumstance and in each organization in terms of what is and isn't appropriate or feels comfortable or not comfortable to share, depending on your relationship. But I think the thing here is that there's too much of a burden and a focus on just that relationship, the line manager and the employee. And that needs to be spread across more relationships. There needs to be good relationships with HR personnel. There needs to be good relationships with your colleagues who are your peers. Sometimes you want to talk about something that might be a problem with peers who might be experiencing it, so that you can actualize and find the language for that and comprehend it from multiple perspectives before you then go and share that with your manager. So it's, as well as developing these people skills for managers, we also need to be thinking about developing those skills in really everyone. I mean, there are obviously those key points in terms of HR personnel. We need to be able to share things with HR in a confidential space, especially if your issues are to do with your manager and you don't feel safe and comfortable talking with them. But also within teams and within kind of peer colleague relationships, building those skills for everyone in the organization will only have positive effects in terms of workloads and being able to manage workloads if we're communicating more effectively, but also with absenteeism and presenteeism. It will have huge effects on being able to utilize people's skills to the best of their abilities, which will also have an economic benefit, which will then improve progression rates and improve retention. So really investing in these skills for everyone.
Yeah, and what you're highlighting here is also that it's not just building individual skills, but actually building organizational capacity for support, right? Are we having, psychological trust, in a wider community and the tribe of our employment, right? Do we also have some confidential lines that people can go to, that they can ask for support to someone else other than their line manager, right? And is there right support for them within the organization? Or if there isn't, where are those boundaries? How much is my employer supposed to be supporting me? And if that goes beyond their expertise, because of course we cannot expect now managers to become therapists and HR to be sitting there just, treating people, so of course, what is that boundary and where do people go next? And what we see very often, that people are just being given these very generic helpline numbers and, call Samaritans, Speak to Mind charity, and here is our employee assistance program. But actually, from our research, and as you know, Valentina, when we are speaking to people are really reluctant to use them. Like, employee assistance programs are way underutilized. And also, the generic helplines, I mean, anyone can Google those, right? So that's equivalent of no support. This is like shedding off responsibility, saying it's got nothing to do with me, like all Samaritans, right? And just talk about this. So the problem as well with like employee assistance programs is that, we refer people for this external support, but we never have any developmental feedback back to the business, right? So if people are reaching out for help and support because they are stressed out at work, because they're working in a toxic environment, because they are experiencing abuse and discrimination, there is no way that we can highlight some of those concerns so we can actually improve organization. So that's why it's so important to have the support infrastructure within the organization, and then reach out to specific tailored experts who can support you with, some of this confidential expert support, but also in a way that you can receive a confidential feedback in some sort of aggregate format to then help organization to improve. Because at the end of the day, we want to prevent those issues from happening, right? Like, when somebody is already off sick with work-related stress, that's too late. If somebody is resigning because they're not happy with the manager, that's already too late. If somebody is on long-term sickness and they're not returning to work because they don't feel comfortable, that's already too late to do something about this. So it's so crucial to have this support ecosystem. So in line with that, can we look at, okay, what are some of those very specific skills that we need to be building in the organization, that we need to be incorporating in our training to be able to do this. So we've highlighted this importance for, let's say, unconscious bias training, active listening skills, ability to respond to, let's say, mental health and suicide issues and so on. So what are some of these other skills that you are seeing, that people are highlighting, that they wish they were taught?
So that's very interesting. And I think I kind of, on that note, and I also want to respond to kind of the need to go externally, but I also, what's relevant here is Ross's comment here about these 3 key areas you need to develop skills in. And I like the way that you structure this, is looking at the intrapersonal skills. So your relationship with yourself. And actually, I don't know whether this was intentional or not, but putting that first, I think it should be first. And having that even just basic training around how to have self-awareness and how to have a constructive relationship with yourself will then immediately better your relationships with others, because it will mean that you're more able to take on constructive criticism and you're more able to hear potentially threatening. And when I say threatening, I don't mean aggressive. I mean information that might threaten your sense of identity or your ego. Hear potentially threatening information and not become defensive, but still treat it constructively. But also you'll be more aware of how your personal traits may be experienced by others, which can be a really useful tool in developing your relationships with others. And as you say, Ross, is the kind of next skill there, your interpersonal skills and also your behavioral skills. And also, I just wanted to kind of come back to a little bit that need to be able to refer people to experts, specialized experts. I think a lot of people are saying, when they talk about employee assistance programs, much of the time the support there is quite generic. You might have access to one particular type of therapy for, say, 6 to 8 weeks for any kind of emotional troubles. And actually, we really want to be moving more towards a system in which someone can have much more tailored and specific support. It's more cost effective. It's has a better effect on the kind of the individual and their life outside of work as well. And it also builds trust in the system. If, I'm sure lots of people have experiences with systems, particularly with the NHS, maybe, whereby you have to go again and again and again until you receive the actual support that you need specifically for your problem or your issue. And I think that's important.
Definitely. And as part of the research that we are doing, right, we are really looking at this ecosystemic relationship between individual and the way they are feeling, the way they are experiencing themselves, and the ways they see the world and their working environment, and the organization in which then they are placed, right? Because obviously there is these relational dynamics that when we are just referring people to somewhere else without having any feedback, we are not getting any information about the impact of this workplace on the individual, but also how this individual can be their best and bring their best contribution to the working environment. So even in line with Ross's comments, like we also have this model at Elite Mind when we're looking at 3 aspects of self-development, right? And we're looking at self-awareness, self-expression, and self-regulation. So, of course, you first need to be able to recognize your own emotions. You need to be able to connect with yourself and have this right interpersonal skills. Like, what is my relationship with myself? Is my view on myself and confidence and self-esteem and the self-talk is actually healthy? Because if not, then that affects everything else. And it's rightly said, it's a starting point. And unless we have that self-awareness, unless we can be our best selves, we cannot then self-regulate our emotional responses to the external environment, and therefore we cannot also help kind of regulate other people if we are always kind of anxious, right? And you'll probably notice that sometimes you speak to other people and you just become anxious just by their presence, or you become drained just by their presence, right? Why some people energizes us and some other people drain us, right? So it goes back to what relationship that person has with themselves and how well they are able to regulate themselves and how congruent then they are, how well they are able to hold that safe space so that it kind of goes beyond just their own internal state. And then final bit is your self-expression, right? And this is your behavior, this is your ability to adapt to different circumstances, this is your work performance, this is your ability to be effective and productive in a different ways, and to express yourself and to communicate your feelings, your emotions in a variety of ways, right? Both in words, but also it's through art, through different actions, through performance, through your work, your quality of work, right? It's our work is such a big expression of who we are and part of our identities, right? So it's definitely so important to include those 3 areas of development in our management skills training. And again, starting with that self-awareness, it's crucial, and it's rarely included in any management and leadership training, right? We are talking about actual practical management skills and time management and so on, where actually we don't know how to manage ourselves.
I think that's such an important point. And, we often think of these things as things that aren't related to work. These are things that you might do in your personal life or in your personal development. But this is professional development.
Yes.
Working on your self-regulation, your self-expression, and your self-awareness are all things that will advance your professional development. And we need to stop making this really unhelpful distinction between personal and professional development as though they don't intersect and as though they don't overlap, because those skills are inherent in being able to understand the needs of others, being able to see ourselves within a wider picture, think strategically, but also then, exactly like you say, be productive, carry out our tasks and bring ourselves into our tasks and express ourselves through our work. And something else I also wanted to note here about, you're talking about how do we create kind of more of an ecosystem in terms of understanding actually what is going on for people, learning what are the needs that are presenting within an organization. And there's another study that also showed that actually a lot of people blame their managers for systemic problems. And this is, I think, really important to note. So we like to have someone to blame, basically, for we want to have someone tangible for bigger problems that we can say you're at fault, you're an agent of this issue. And it's not to say that managers don't participate in perpetuating these issues, I'm sure they do, but there is also an opportunity here. So it's what can help managers or can help this situation, I think, is having an ability to show transparency. So this is what the company structure is, or this is what the organization wants. These are my personal objectives. These are my aims. This is how I see the situation as an individual. And I would like to hear what you have to say. And then what the other side of that is, so there's that collecting that feedback, and hopefully by this point you've created an environment in which someone's comfortable sharing that, but then also feeding that upwards as well and feeding that back into the system. And if all of those managers are equally trained in those same things, then there'll be a much cleaner flow of communication, kind of vertically and horizontally, and that will really help with developing the kind of ecosystem of support here, but also the ecosystem of communication, so that everybody is on the same page, and that contributes to having a shared vision and a shared mission and feeling a sense of shared cultural identity within your organization, which also helps with forming those bonds. And kind of we're also looking at, there's you want to do that in an organic way, so in a way that centers on people's skills and those conversations, but also, like you say, Evelina, there are some things we just don't want to talk to our managers about, and that's okay. And that's why there also needs to be systems in place that where employee needs can be heard and understood anonymously and shared in a way that is kind of focusing on the potential problems and solutions rather than the individuals who have expressed those, and sharing that back to decision makers and those who are defining strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And I would like to highlight that there are 3 areas that we can use as a point of checking in and really making sure that we kind of systemizing our conversations and our ways of identifying some of those unmet needs. So one is your traditional one-to-one appraisals, right? So your regular check-ins with your managers, like how can we make sure that we're creating an opportunity for people to speak up and to check in, and we build that trust. Second is return to work. So when somebody is absent, most companies, smaller companies especially, they don't have a system to actually track why this person's been absent, if they've just been off, for a day or two, and it doesn't require, let's say, doctor's note. And we actually not checking what support they need, and not really making that best out of that opportunity to actually realign and check in, is this person's needs are being met. And then the third bit, and this is where the boundary is between performance management and support, because very often people will not raise those concerns. They will not come and speak up about their personal issues, and managers are not able to notice some of the signs and some of the support that is needed. But what they are seeing is a decline in that person's performance, right? So very often we start disciplining the person and we start performance management process without actually looking at, have I given this person all the help and support that is needed for them to be able to do that job? And one of the things that are coming out as part of our research, as you know, Valentina, very well, is these actually undiagnosed neurodiverse conditions. And this is very often even in a scenarios where individual doesn't know that themselves, or sometimes they do, but they choose not to share it, right? So someone might have, something as simple and common as dyslexia, right? But if they are not sharing it, the way it comes across in their behavior, that, they might not be, engaging in a meetings in the same way. They might not be responding to emails. They will not be communicating in any written channels with the team. And there's also, a lot of other conditions that will, again, like ADHD, could be overwhelming, and you're struggling to manage all of your priorities. And therefore, some of the things will be left undone, which, can be seen as a kind of poor performance, where actually it's your needs that haven't been met, right? The way these targets and priorities have been assigned to you doesn't fit the way your brain operates, right? So this is a very, very important point, making sure that, before we get to that performance management point, we create systems of checking in, and we have regular check-ins with our line managers. We also have a confidential way to check in whether person's needs are being met as part of their return to work process after all of their absences, and making sure that we start any performance management or disciplinary procedure by assessing all of the person's needs first and asking, have we as an organization given everything that we can to this person to be able to do their job well?
Certainly, I think that's a really important point. And, we can, when we're thinking about performance management reviews, making sure that we ask, okay, what are the barriers here? Not, not assuming someone just needs to try harder.
And not taking a blame, right? It's not necessarily what have I done wrong so that you're not performing, but actually, putting ourselves on the same page and looking, okay, how can we overcome this problem together, right? And kind of nearly externalizing it, taking it away from, blame and making it personal responsibility, but looking at the system and the structure and working on solving some of those systemic issues.
Certainly. That's being able to exactly externalize an issue like that, so that it's not a question of who's at fault. As soon as we enter that blame game, we're not, it becomes about egos, it becomes about responsibility and protecting a sense of identity. It doesn't become about solving a problem. So being able to step back and think, okay, how can we, exactly as you say, solve an issue together or identify what a barrier is, it can really, really change the game in terms of developing somebody's performance that a disciplinary often won't achieve.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I haven't realized, we've been talking for nearly an hour, so I think, definitely this is a topic that, we could still continue for the rest of the day, and there's still going to be so much to be said. But definitely, I think in a summary, it's really recognizing that our leadership and management training currently is not representative of what it should be in order for us to create inclusive and supportive working environments that proactively drive employee well-being. And it's so crucial to be able to include those interpersonal, and behavioral development skills, and also build systems of support of how we can have those conversations, how we can enable safety and trust, and how we can check in and have a ways to assess individual needs before it gets to the point of performance and kind of critical business challenges, like losing your employees and so on. So we definitely encourage anyone who would like some more skills development to reach out to us. We do deliver management training workshops. We deliver communication skills and active listening workshops as well, that helps to build that capacity. But as well, as part of our research project that we are doing, we are actually helping organizations to assess this ecosystemic level of support that you are able to provide, and highlight some of the risks, and we can then help you to resolve those. So please feel free to reach out to us for any help and support. We always more than happy to help in any way that we can. And any other questions, any other comments, please feel free to reach out to me and Valentina, and we will see you next week.
Lovely. See you next week.
Bye.